Hello. In this video, I would like to introduce the Xiaomi 13 Pro review. I trust that this video is very useful for you. I am introducing to you the detailed Xiaomi 13 Pro review that is important, especially conclusion at the end of the video. Please kindly enjoy watching the video as following. It's awkward to be a middle child, they say. You aren't the firstborn, you aren't the youngest, you're just there, in the middle, constantly forgotten. The firstborn is the oldest and gets all the accolades, while the youngest is the smallest, requiring a lot of attention. You, on the other hand, are neither. This is the position the Xiaomi 13 Pro finds itself in. The 13 Ultra is the accolade-collecting overachiever. The Vanilla 13 is the only one of the series that's going to work well with small hands, or people who simply prefer smaller, if not small per se, phones, and the 13 Pro also exists. Design. It's getting harder and harder to write this section of a long-term review with each one we do. Most high-end phones are a slab of glass with some metal sandwiched in between for good measure. Guess what? The Xiaomi 13 Pro is like this too. Some high-end phones, but less and less by the day, have screen glass that curves on the sides. The Xiaomi 13 Pro is one of those, and despite the haters, we still love both the look of curved glass and the feel it enables when performing the back gesture. It's just way smoother when it's curved. Speaking of the curved glass, we can practically read the "but accidental touches" comments, and, as usual, we have to mention that, for us, these have only ever been problematic on Samsung smartphones with curved screens, and even there, the situation has been getting progressively better over the past few years. Second, if you use such a device with a case, as most people do, 99% of those accidental touches go away simply by virtue of the case being there. Finally, if neither of these arguments has convinced you yet, you'll be happy to know that Xiaomi has implemented a special setting that lets you adjust the sensitivity around the curves. We never needed to use this, but it's there to assuage your fears if you need it. From the front, as you'd expect, the Xiaomi 13 Pro looks like a high-end smartphone released in the past few years. It's almost all screen and has a centered hole punch cutout for the selfie camera. The bezels aren't symmetrical, which is a shame at this price point. Nothing was able to do it on a much cheaper device, so surely Xiaomi could too. The bottom bezel is thicker than the rest. The metal frame is tiny because of the way both the front glass and the back ceramic curve into it, and that makes picking this phone up not the easiest experience. 90 to 98% of what you're touching is slippery, glass or ceramic, and the frame itself isn't non-slippery. It's just a tad less. Once you have managed to pick it up, though, using it is made very comfortable by the same curves we described earlier. You win some, you lose some, as they say. The camera island on the rear is massive and a square with rounded corners. The shape somehow makes it look bigger than it is. There's no escaping ginormous camera islands on a flagship device these days, even Apple's doing it. So it is what it is. On the funny side, it's so huge that you won't have any wobble when typing while the phone is sitting on its back on a hard surface, only when you try and touch something in the top left part of the screen. We wouldn't call this the ugliest camera island we've seen, but it's definitely not pretty. It just feels functional and, to some extent, to the detriment of aesthetics, we'd say. Then again, the great thing about a camera island, any camera island really, is that it's on the part of the phone you aren't looking at most of the time. Black ceramic review unit's back is shiny, mirror-like, and extremely slippery, as you'd expect from ceramic. It looks pretty, though, and even a little bit bling. Just an ever so slight embellishment to the otherwise boring colorway comes from how the rear plays with light constantly. This material does like to show fingerprints too. It's not as bad as the worst shiny glass offenders, but it is close. Speakers. The Xiaomi 13 Pro speakers are as good as the best out there on a slab-style phone that isn't gaming-oriented. You simply won't be left wanting with these, not when it comes to volume, and not when it comes to quality, although for this you need to always remember how tiny phone speakers really are. So while there is a little bit of bass on offer here, if you like loads of it, you'll love headphones, and TWS earbuds, and Bluetooth speakers much more. It's just how it is. That aside, there's nothing bad to say about these speakers. They're just amazing, at least for where the tech is today. Perhaps in the future phones will get even better speakers in mainstream slab-style smartphones, but for now, these will serve anyone well. Of course, if you're listening in a very loud environment, you may have to bring your phone closer to your ear, but much less so than with others, and it happens at a higher ambient volume than with most. Performance and smoothness. The Xiaomi 13 Pro is the smoothest feeling smartphone we've ever reviewed long-term. So far, at least. The difference between the 13 Pro and last year's smoothness king, the OnePlus 10 Pro, isn't huge, but it's noticeable for sure. And the difference between the 13 Pro and any other smartphone out there is clearly observable after a few minutes of playing with this one and then going back to anything else. Performance-wise, this is a beast, just as you'd expect from a smartphone that's powered by what is still the best-performing chipset in the Android world. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is simply faster than its predecessor, and while it may not be by much, it's pretty clear in day-to-day tasks even, not to mention gaming. That said, the 8 and 8 Plus Gen 1 aren't slouches either, but the improved thermals of the current generation really do let the chip shine more. Battery life and charging. The Xiaomi 13 Pro's 4820 mAh cell may not seem like all that much, since most of its competitors go with 5000 mAh, but paired with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and MIUI 14 it's delivered outstanding longevity. We always managed to finish a day on one charge, we never had a need for a midday top-up with our use case, detailed below. That said, even if we had needed such top-ups, the 120W charging would have made them a few-minute affair every single time. Consider the fact that this phone charges from 0 to full in a measly 22 minutes. That's still insane to this day, even though it's been a while now since Xiaomi introduced 120W charging, but it continues to seem like more or less a miracle compared to what other companies are doing, looking at you, Apple, Samsung, and Google. Yes, you do need to carry the bundled charger and cable with you to get such a charge rate, but we think that's a small price to pay in order to basically fully relinquish any battery anxiety you might have. Now, while we were very happy with the battery life we got every single day, we were very unhappy with the fact that MIUI 14 on the 13 Pro doesn't give us a screen-on-time number. We assume this is a bug, but it's still not been fixed, many months after the phone's launch. So we simply can't give you our usual screenshots showing screen-on-times on different days so you can get an idea of what it was like. You will, unfortunately, have to take our word for it. This felt like one of the best battery performers we've reviewed long-term in the past few months. Xiaomi used to skimp on wireless charging many years ago, but now thankfully that's not a thing anymore, at least at this price, so you do get 50W wireless charging, though you do need a special charger to reach that speed. With a run-of-the-mill Qi charger you won't be anywhere near that, but it could still find its use for overnight charging, for example. As usual, our use case involves around 12 to 17 hours off the charger in a day starting from full, with primarily Wi-Fi 6 connectivity, about an hour or so on 5G, Bluetooth always on, an hour or two of listening to music or podcasts via TWS earbuds, an hour or so of phone calls, and about half an hour of GPS navigation via Waze, with location turned on all the time, including Bluetooth and Wi-Fi scanning. The normal caveat applies: if your use case is more extreme than ours, and especially if you spend a lot of time where Wi-Fi and mobile network signals aren't great, then you'll get worse battery life than we did. It might still be good, just not outstanding, so keep that in mind. Camera. While it may not have the 13 Ultra's entire set of cameras, the Xiaomi 13 Pro is absolutely no slouch in the camera department, at least on paper. The Type 1-inch main sensor is present, and still the biggest fitted in a smartphone, even though it's not technically one, but that's a quirk of the camera industry which has been perpetuated in the smartphone world. The ultra-wide is the same resolution as the Ultras, but less wide, and the 3.2x optical zoom camera is obviously no match for the Ultra's 5x periscope telephoto at longer distances, but should be very comparable to the Ultra's very own 3.2x snapper for closer targets. If the 13 Ultra didn't exist, the 13 Pro's camera system would easily be described as top of the line, with the omission of a periscope, that is. So don't underestimate this phone's abilities in the camera department. Conclusion. The Xiaomi 13 Pro is one of the best phones of the year so far. That said, obviously the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is better still, unless you really consider quicker charging as the most important thing for you. But the question isn't whether the Ultra is better than the Pro, the question is whether, for you personally, it's worth hundreds of euros more for the cameras it has and the slightly brighter screen and the marginally bigger battery capacity. That's it, that's the main thing you need to think about when considering a pick between these two. Also, the Ultra's price makes it compete head-on with the likes of the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, and that makes it a tougher sell than the 13 Pro, weirdly enough, even if it's better, because most people factor in brand awareness and the amount of warranty service they can get, and some people also want more timely updates, be those small security ones that fix bugs or the big Android version updates. So in a way, while still not being affordable, with its marginally lower price, the Xiaomi 13 Pro is in a slightly better position in the market compared to the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. That is before you consider the Samsung Galaxy S23 Plus, which currently can be found cheaper than the 13 Pro in some places. That phone has the brand cachet, the longer update promise, the timelier updates, the same SoC but overclocked a tad, good cameras too, but it also has a less smooth software experience, a lower res screen, and much slower charging. As usual, it's all up to you, you know best which boxes a smartphone needs to tick for your taste and use case. However, the Xiaomi 13 Pro can definitely stand on its own even in the very crowded space nowadays, with great high-end cameras, not the best, but arguably very close and good enough for most people. Smoothness is the best we've ever encountered so far in a long-term review. The OnePlus 10 Pro from last year has finally been dethroned. MIUI, in its 14th version/iteration, still looks like its predecessors, and that might be an issue if you're looking for a fresher UI, and it continues to have some idiosyncrasies that, for some reason, have been ignored so far. Not to mention bugs, not so many that we'd say you should stay away, but enough that we urge you to consider them before making any purchase decision. The slow and far between updates don't help either. Otherwise, MIUI works and is pretty easy to get used to nowadays, plus it comes with a lot of customization options, among the most out there, really. Some of its features are unmatched by the competition to this day, the two types of control center, the two ways to show recents, and the reading mode blue light filter instantly come to mind, but there's more. You could look at such things as a net positive if you're the tinkering type, or a disadvantage if all you want is things to just work. It's up to you. Battery life is great, charging is among the fastest out there and day and night compared to the worst offenders in the space, looking at you, Apple, Google, and Samsung, and even if you can't get through an entire day with a full charge, a quick top-up is so fast that we'd wager battery anxiety will be totally a thing of the past with this phone, provided you can use the bundled charger and cable. The screen is among the best ever put into a smartphone, even though there are slightly brighter ones, but you wouldn't notice the difference unless you held them side by side, and almost no one does that outside of reviewers like us. The speakers are as good as the best out there, and so is the vibration motor, and the fingerprint sensor is the best in-display one we've ever used. In the end, perhaps the Xiaomi 13 Pro has two impediments to becoming a true bestseller. One of them is its middle child status and the constantly floating shadow of its more potent sibling, the 13 Ultra, which we've discussed above. The other is simply the fact that Xiaomi and its various sub-brands have, over the years, been so good at creating value for money mid-rangers and low-end smartphones that a lot of people might not see the point of paying this much for a Xiaomi. There's that association with cheap and cheerful devices, with getting more than your money's worth. But while that still applies to entry-level and mid-range smartphones, it simply can't apply to a properly high-end device, which is what this is. The flagship killers, of which Xiaomi has a line too, the T series, may try to sleight of hand you into thinking you're getting most of a high-end device for a fraction of the price, but that's simply not true. With those, you're not getting cameras that are on par, you're not getting screens that are on par, and most of the time, you're also not getting a lot of the little things that you might not pay attention to on a spec sheet, things such as amazing speakers or an almost perfect fingerprint sensor, stuff like that. The markup on more expensive devices will always be higher than for mid-rangers, and the latter is what flagship killers really are after all, despite how they're marketed. But so what? Even if a high-end phone delivers only 20% more, whatever, than a flagship killer and is 40% more expensive, the high-end phone is still better. Not by exactly as much as you're paying on top, but it is, and in our online world obsessed with maximization of returns that can easily be overlooked. And that's the tale of the Xiaomi 13 Pro, and why we think most people might not give it a serious look. But if you do give it a chance, provided you're okay with its very few downsides that we've already described, we're sure you'll be as happy with it as we were, which is to say, very. Thank you for watching. See you next videos.